Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michelle Smith. I am a registered licensed dietitian. Welcome to my kitchen. Our presentation for today is healthy holiday appetizers. We will be preparing two appetizers. One is a Chinese turkey 5-spice lettuce wrap, and the other is a crab stuffed mushroom. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to place them in the chat box and I will go over them at the end of the presentation. So we're going to get started with the crab stuffed mushrooms just because they take about 15 to 20 minutes to cook. So the first thing we're going to do is preheat our pan. I have my pan on a low heat here. This is an iron skillet, so it tends to hold heat pretty rapidly and it tends to stay hot at a high heat. So I'm going to just heat it up on low heat. The other thing that I find that's really helpful, because I know the holidays can be overwhelming, is that if you're planning on having appetizers, is I would suggest preparing the ingredients in mason jars. Mason jars are great for portion controlling everything. And it also helps preserve the product a little bit longer. So if you didn't get to the appetizer or to the product, it will at least stay fresh for about 7 to 8 days. So we're going to get started. I believe my pan is warm. I'm going to just place a little bit of oil in my pan. I am using canola oil. It does recommend olive oil. I'm going to put it on a little high so that we can cook it a little bit faster. So my olive oil is heating, or my canola oil is heating up. We are going to place 1 clove of garlic in the pan. Again, at the end of this presentation or cooking demonstration, we will post the recipes, so feel free to take a picture of them on your phone. So I'm just going to peel my garlic, put it in my garlic press, and place it in the pan in hot oil. So that's 1 clove of garlic. And about 2 tablespoons of chopped scallion. So we're just going to saute this, let it caramelize a little bit, bring out some of the sugars and soften it, because we're going to add this to the stuffing for the mushrooms. Right, and while that is cooking, we'll get started with the stuffing. Okay, so we are going to use 1 cup of chopped crab meat. So you can purchase canned crab meat or you can use the imitation. I ended up using imitation crab meat here. And this is a 2-cup mason jar. I know that I only need 1 cup. So I'm going to put about half of this into my bowl. Okay. And then, like I said, the rest of this, you can store and use it for another ingredient later. So we have 1 cup of crab meat. We are going to use a 1/4 cup of mozzarella, or Monterey Jack cheese. So I have a 1/4 cup here. This is about 1 cup of cheese. So I know I'll be using most of this by the end of the recipe. There's a 1/4 cup of cheese. It's going to help hold things together. And again, this is Monterey Jack cheese. I tend to like to purchase the blocks of cheese and grate it myself because it doesn't have all those fillers. We're going to place 1 egg. And again, this will act as a binder. If you don't like to use the yolk, you can certainly use just 2 whites. I'm going to mix this up real well. And start to smell the scallions and the garlic. You don't want to cook the garlic too high because it can become bitter. Right, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. So we have 1 cup of crab meat. We have a 1/4 cup of Monterey Jack. A 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. I'm using the seasoned panko breadcrumbs. You can purchase unseasoned. They will be lower in sodium. So I'm gonna mix this up. And then we are going to add a half a teaspoon of dill. So the scallions and the garlic are nicely toasted, softened, caramelized. I'm going to add it to the stuffing. Now you'll probably notice I like to reduce the amount of dishes that I use. So I'm going to use the same pot or pan to saute my ground turkey in the next recipe. So again, that's the key too when you're cooking, is to try to minimize the amount of dishes that you use. So here we have our 2 tablespoons of scallions and the 1 clove of garlic. I'm going to just mix this all up nicely. And then we need 1 teaspoon of lemon, which is about 1/4 of a lemon. And when you cut, always wash your lemon and then roll it. So this is already cut. This is from a different recipe. So before you cut your lemon, I would suggest that you roll it just to bring all the juices to the surface. So I'm going to take this 1 lemon. It calls for about a teaspoon. Just squeeze a little bit in until I think I have a teaspoon. And then mix that. So we have our crab meat, garlic, scallions, breadcrumbs, and the cheese. So now we'll get our mushrooms prepared, and I'm going to use this pie plate or casserole dish. And what is recommended is to use about 1/3 of a cup, which equates to about 6 tablespoons of butter. So I have this butter that's melted here. Actually, it's solidified a little bit. I'm gonna put it in the microwave for about 30 seconds. Always make sure you cover your butter or it will slather. I get this to melt a little bit more. What we're going to do is place the butter in the pan and we'll roll our mushrooms in the butter. Okay. Now with mushrooms, these are baby Bella. You can use any mushroom of your choice. With mushrooms, you don't want to submerge them underwater because they have a very high water content. So what I would suggest is just to take a moist paper towel and just wipe the outsides of them. So basically you'll just wipe them off just to get the extra soil. And then in order to create a little cup, what you do is you just pop the stem like so. I don't know if you heard that pop. I always suggest keep the stems. I always put them in a mason jar because again, they'll preserve longer. Pop them in the pop the stems, and then you just take a spoon and you'll lightly remove some of the flesh and the gills of the inside of the mushroom, just so that you have a larger surface area to stuff. Right. So I have some already prepared. And again, all you have to do is wipe them down, because if you get them wet, they're just going to get really mushy. You want them to have a little crunch. Let's see if that has melted for us. So again, we're going to take about 6 tablespoons. This is 1/3 of a cup of butter. And we're just going to roll the mushrooms into the butter. And if you don't want to use butter, you can certainly use olive oil. You could use coconut oil. We're not using a lot here. It's not going to absorb it. It's just to help cook it and add some flavor. Again, if you're concerned about sodium, you could certainly use unsalted butter. This is unsalted butter that I'm using. All right, so we rolled our mushrooms. And then we will just stuff them with our crab stuffing. So it's about a tablespoon. Nice heaping tablespoon. You want to pat it in there. It's very colorful. So this filling will stuff predominantly like 12 mushrooms. So we get about 12 servings out of this filling. I'm not going to use all of this. I will put it in the refrigerator and I can use it for another recipe, or I could use it for another social event. So we'll just stuff those. All right. And then we will top it with the remaining of the Monterey Jack cheese. All right, so we're just going to sprinkle the top with some more cheese, just a little bit. And again, you know, here I grated about 3/4 of a cup, and you can see I'm not using all of it. Again, it's because I'm only preparing 6 mushrooms. So place them in the casserole just like so. And then I'm going to pour a little white wine. It's a dry white wine. I'm using a Chardonnay. It's by Sutter Home. And this is going to add a little bit more flavor to the mushrooms. So we'll place these in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The oven was preheated. So at the appropriate temperature, I'm going to place it in the middle rack and we'll let these cook for about 15 minutes. All right, so let's move on to our next recipe, which is the Chinese 5-spice lettuce wraps. All right. So with the lettuce wraps, I'm going to use the same pan because it was just onions and garlic. So it'll add some flavor. So I'll preheat my pan so it's nice and warm. And I'm using a cast iron. So this recipe calls for about 2 teaspoons of sesame oil. Okay, and that's going to give a nice Asian spice flavor. We're just going to let that oil heat up. You never want to add cold food to your oil. You want to let your oil heat up before you add your vegetables. And the vegetables that we will be adding to this Asian spice blend is peppers and water chestnuts and garlic. I'm sorry, and ginger, not garlic, ginger. So we have a cup of peppers here. This was 1 large pepper that I chopped up. I happen to have red and green pepper left over, so I chopped them up and I want a nice color. Looks like the oil is nice and warm. You can hear it sizzling, so I'll add the peppers. Just get these 2 sides. Now, once the peppers are tender and slightly caramelized to pull out some of the natural sugars in the peppers, then I will add the ginger. So it calls for about a tablespoon of ginger, which is about the size of your thumb. I'm going to take this fresh ginger. If you purchase a big root of ginger and you're finding that you don't use all of it, you can just take that root and place it right in your freezer. And it will stay fresh in your freezer for a good 6 months. So this is a root that I had used for a previous recipe and I just pulled it out and defrosted. So I'm going to take about a thumb size piece of ginger root. Chop it up here while the peppers are sauteing. Just place another tablespoon of ginger in there. And then we will add about a pound of ground turkey. We're using ground turkey because it's lean. This is about 94% lean, so anything over 90% lean. So turn this up high so we'll cook a little bit faster. We only have about 2 more minutes left. Let's get this cooking. It'll take about 6 minutes to cook the turkey through. I'm going to wash my hands because I touched raw meat. We don't want the risk of any bacteria. Another good idea when you're handling raw meat is maybe to use gloves, so then you can just handle the meat while you have the gloves on and then dispose of the gloves. And we're choosing to use ground turkey because, again, it's leaner than beef. It's lower in saturated fat. Very colorful with the red and green peppers. It makes me think of Christmas. It's a really good way to sneak in vegetables over the holidays without people really noticing it. With the stuffed mushrooms, with the onions, and then you have the Asian wraps with the peppers, and the herbs, water chestnuts, and the lettuce wraps. All right, so this is almost cooked through. I will add the water chestnuts. We add about a cup. So I took a can of water chestnuts, drained them, chopped them, and put them in a 1-cup mason jar so that I know that I'm adding the appropriate serving proportion to the recipe. Water chestnuts are going to add a little crunch to the dish. Now, because there's not a lot of fat in the ground turkey, we're going to add just a little bit of broth. You can use, I think the recipe calls for chicken broth or turkey broth. If you don't care for those, you can certainly use a vegetable broth. I'm actually using a bone broth just to put in a little, introduce a little bit more collagen. It's a little bit thicker. And I'll add more flavor. So put that in just to give it, to help it cook a little bit faster and steam up. And that liquid will cook off and add some flavor to the turkey. I believe the recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of the Chinese 5-spice. Chinese 5-spice consists of ginger, cloves, cinnamon, anise, and I believe fennel. Let's see if I'm missing anything here. So yeah, cinnamon, anise, cloves, ginger and fennel. It's going to give a nice flavor. And then we will also be adding 2 tablespoons of hoisin sauce. This is from Kikkoman. You can purchase a low sodium, which I believe I'm using here is a low sodium. We'll add 2 tablespoons. The recipe calls for 4 tablespoons, but we're going to set 2 tablespoons aside to place on the wraps. All right, so we have our pepper, our pound of ground turkey, a can of chopped water, chestnuts, and some broth, the hoisin sauce, and a teaspoon of the 5 spice, the Chinese 5 spice. If you're really ambitious, you can make your own hoisin sauce, but you can find it in your local grocery store in the Asian food section, and you can find low sodium if you were concerned about the amount of sodium that's in the sauce. A lot of times those Asian spice sauces can have a lot of sodium in them. All right, so our vegetables are nice and tender. Looks like the meat is no longer pink and cooked through. Just turn this down, and you can let this rest for a good 5 to 10 minutes. You can serve it hot or you can serve it cold. So we're going to let it rest. I'm just going to take a peek at the mushrooms and see how they're doing. What I like to do is, again, have everything prepared, have this cooked and sitting on the stovetop so that it's warm. And then it's when it's at room temperature, I'll place it in a bib lettuce. And I'll demonstrate how to do that in just a moment. So we'll let that sit, let all the flavors marry, and then let's see how our mushrooms are doing. We'll give them about 5 more minutes. So let me just demonstrate how to put these wraps together. All right. So here's a couple. So what I'm using here is a butter lettuce, it's called, or you can find premium butter lettuce. And I just basically removed, there's a root at the end. I removed the root and I just rinsed off each individual leaf. Okay, and then you can place it in the refrigerator until you're ready, so it'll stay fresh and crisp. And so now what I have here are a couple of leaves. And what you'll do is place them on a plate. You can place them on a platter if you like. And then the remaining hoisin sauce, it's 4 tablespoons, but we're not going to put a whole tablespoon. You just take about 1/4 of a teaspoon and just lightly dress the lettuce with the sauce. It's just going to add a little bit more flavor to the wrap. So you kind of just spread a little bit on each individual leaf. And then what we'll do, as this turkey sits as well, a lot of the extra broth will cook off. So you could use a slotted spoon if there's still broth. We'll just place about a tablespoon of the filling in the lettuce. And you're going to notice that every leaf is a different size. So you may not be able to put a tablespoon in a whole leaf. But this is what it would look like. And then you would top it with some shaved carrot just to give it a little color and crunch. And you can use, I like to use scallions, but you could use cilantro, you could use parsley, but I like to just use scallions just to give it a little bit more, or you could use chives, again, just to give it a little more crunch and some flavor. This is what your lettuce wraps would look like. This is the Chinese 5-spice turkey wraps. Super fun, super colorful, great way to sneak in those vegetables. Let's pull out these mushrooms. Smell amazing. They're making me hungry. So they're a little chart on the top. You can see the cheese is melted, so it's perfect. They've been in for about 15 minutes. And again, you would just take these and place them on your platter like so. Allow them to cool, of course. You don't want anybody eating a very hot mushroom and burning their mouth, but if you wanted to, you could take the remaining sauce that's in here, the butter and the wine. It smells delicious, and just pour it over top. But there you go. So here we have our crab stuffed mushrooms and our lettuce wraps. And let me just share with you the recipes. And like I said, please feel free to take a photo picture of this, or you could write it down. Very, very simple, delicious recipes. So again, if there are any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat box. This is the 5-spice lettuce wrap recipe. Let me see. We do have a couple questions. How much broth is needed? Very good question. So I used a half a cup of broth for the lettuce wraps. And why do you cover the butter? Oh, cook the butter in the microwave to prevent splatter. So I put the butter in the microwave with a cover. So yes, so it doesn't splatter, because I only cooked it for 30 seconds, but sometimes the butter will get too hot and it will splatter and make a mess in the microwave. So that's an excellent question. If you don't have a specific cover like that, you can certainly use a paper plate or a paper towel. Anytime you cook in the microwave, you really should cover your food so that it doesn't make a mess and it reduces cleanup. Excellent questions. Thank you so much. So that's the lettuce wrap recipe. And then here is the crab stuffed mushrooms recipe. So again, please feel free to take a picture. I hope that you'll give these a try. I hope that you enjoyed this and found this to be helpful. And they're delicious. Highly recommend trying them. Oh, here's another question. Thank you. They are delicious. And again, it's a great way to sneak in vegetables, something a little different than, I'm not quite sure what your family would usually serve. I know my in-laws family, it's typically a lot of cheese and fried foods and meats and sausages. This is just another way to introduce something new to your friends and family. So thank you all for attending. I wish you all a wonderful holiday, and I hope to see you again sometime.